Hey everyone, in this video we are going to explore the concept of form. So how we take an object that appears very flat and how we make it look three-dimensional. We're going to do this by using shadows, which is our hue or our color, by adding black into it. These are called shades. When we add black, this is adding black into a hue. And we're also going to do this by using or creating the illusion of light by using different tints of a hue. And this is by adding white. So what we also want to consider is that when we're creating the illusion of light in the worlds, we're going to be working off a 3-point light system or 3-point light setup. So when you're outside, sunlight is your primary source of light. So this is going to be your primary or your key light. And this is predominantly where you're get light, but it's going to bounce around depending on the surface here. It's gonna bounce, and the surface isn't perfect, so it'll be jagged and things like that. So it's going to bounce possibly in all these different directions, and it's probably going to hit other objects and then bounce down to the ground. So the ground also acts as kind of another light source. You can think of that as well. And also the sky, because the sky bounces around light, the sky acts also as a secondary light source. So the actual atmosphere. So this is the sky. It's going to be a secondary light source. Your ground is also going to reflect light. So we're going to work with a 3-point light system to ensure that our creations, our characters look quite dynamic. But we're going to start off by just kind of looking at the lighting principle, the most basic lighting principle on how we can create the illusion of form. I'm going to turn that layer off and I'm going to open up a new layer. And this is where I'm going to put down my I'm going to call it a base sphere. And right now it's just going to look like a circle. It's not going to look like a sphere just yet, but that's my goal, for it to end up looking like a sphere. I'm going to work with a mid-tone, and I'm going to add shadows and add highlights on here. And I'm going to actually, before I do that, I'm going to drag a picture into this frame so we can talk about it. So if we're looking at this image, you'll notice that we have a light source. So this would be our sun if we were outside. This is only one light source. You can consider the kind of the ground or the surface as a second light source as well, but it's really just reflected light, so it's not very strong. So this, you can see the reflected light that's bouncing from the table back up onto the sphere. The highlights and the lights are going to be obviously directly in front of our light source or our key light. Highlights are the point that is perpendicular, or the most perpendicular to the actual light source. Everything else will kind of gradually get darker and darker. We're actually going to be painting kind of with this medium, this mid-tone, and then we're going to be adding light and then adding shadow. So we're always going to start with our middle tone and then bring in lighter values to create the illusion of light, and then bring in darker values to create the illusion of shadow. So that's how we're going to work with this. So I'm going to move this back off here, and we're going to kind of create our own version of this. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go click on my color picker, and I'm going to grab kind of a medium gray. And that's what we were using for the background of some of our images so far. So I'm going to use just like a really hard brush, so it's 100% hardness, and it pretty sizable, and I'm just going to use this to create my my sphere, and I'm going to make sure I'm on the right layer, and I'm just going to tap it to create my sphere. Oh, that's not as big as I thought it would be. The opacity is on. Let me go back. undo, and then there we go. Good. So there is my sphere. And actually I put it on the wrong layer, so I'm going to call this base sphere, and I'm going to delete that out. So I want to keep organized. So this is going to be my base sphere. I'm going to do a layer, and I'm going to add shadows, and I'm also going to do another layer and add the light. So I'm going to bring some shadow into my sphere, and this shadow, and I'm going to pull this back here again, we're going to create this shadow here, and this is called a form shadow or a core shadow, and that's just kind of, notice how it's curving around the form of our object. So I'm gonna move this out of here, and I'm going to do that by dropping a little bit lower, and I want to be working with my brush that you were provided with in the set, and this is the soft op flow. Okay, so I'm going to use that one, and I really want to make sure that I'm going very delicately. And as I said in a previous video, if you don't like your line that you've made, or if you don't like the shadow you brought in, undo it, redo it again. So I'm going to turn this up, this size of brush up, because I want it to be bigger, and I'm going to gradually, just very softly, oh, pardon me, before I do that, I should put where my light source is. So I'm actually going to put my light source on the left over here. I'm going to change my brush, and this is going to be my light source on this side, so it's a light shining down. And again, this would be a little bit kind of turned out, but it's hard to tell. So I'm going to go back in here, and I'm going to grab a darker value, and I'm going to brush this in. Again, you want to be on your soft op flow, and I'm going to make this larger, and I'm going to just gradually sweep this in. Really kind of softly sweep it. Oh, I apologize. I'm going to undo. I forgot. This is a tip I want to show you. If you want to just, you'll notice when I did that, it went on the background. That's no good. If you want to stay just within the pixels of a previous layer, so in this case, the base sphere, what you're going to do is I'm on my shadow layer. I'm going to, hold Control, and then I'm going to click on the thumbnail of the pixels I want to use. So on a PC, I can click on Control H, and it's going to hide the selection. So the selection is still there, as you can see. I'm not able to draw outside of my my pixels that are selected, but it's hidden, and this is going to help us when we're painting. So I'm going to undo. I think I just accidentally undid my selection. So I'm going to, again, I held Control, I clicked on the thumbnail, now I'm going to do Control H to hide the little marching ant selection. And now this is where I'm going to start kind of sweeping my form in. You can go over this as many times as you want. You want it to look kind of delicate. And it's already starting to look more three-dimensional than previously. So now I'm going to switch to the light layer, and I'm going to actually make this a lighter value than I have here. In order to pick your value quickly, you're going to hold Alt or Option on the Mac, and it's going to turn into like a little eyedropper. This is going to pick that exact color that you have selected there. I'm opening my color picker because I want to turn up or increase the value there, so it's lighter. Increase my tint, and I'm gonna go make sure my brush is very sizable, and I'm gonna kind of gradually tap the light in here, because this is where that light is hitting. So you can see it's already starting to brighten up in that area, and I'm doing it very subtly and slowly. It's easier to kind of build it up slowly than kind of rush through it. What I'm going to do at this point is I can put my highlight in, as well. Again, I'm going to go back to the color that I was on, and I'm going to even brighten it up to that full white. Now, the highlight is, you don't want to overdo highlights, so I'm actually going to turn my brush size down a little bit, and I'm going to try to make this the brightest point on my sphere. I'm going to tap that in. You want it to look very noticeably the brightest. So it's already giving that the illusion of three-dimensionality here. So as you can see from the previous image we were using, you can see here is kind of your midtones right here. And this is what we started with. And then you can see your shadows are getting darker around the edges, and I might even darken that up again a little bit. And then your light, this is your light side, and then there's different lights within there. So there is your light, and then there's your highlight. So this is where my highlight is residing, and this is where my lighter area is. So I'm actually going to bring a value. I'm going to go Alt and click on this again to see what exact color that was. And I'm going to drop it a little bit because I want to make this side even darker. I'm going to go back to my shadow layer. I'm going to make my brush a little larger, and I'm going to sweep in that in right there. So you're creating that illusion of form. One thing we're going to do, and again, this is just going to kind of strengthen in our characters. It's going to strengthen the concept of them, kind of that their form is turning and they're very three-dimensional. And I'm going to make my brush a little smaller, and you're going to kind of sweep in just a very, very soft shadow around the edge. And this is to really just emphasize that this form is turning. This is a cast shadow. Basically, the light that's hitting the object, it's not going through and it's been blocked. So this is kind of like what's been blocked, the light that's been blocked. Now, from the initial object. Now, because we talked about how the ground also bounces light, the ground will bounce up some light onto the sphere itself down below. So it won't be pitch black down here in the shadow. So reflected light is only truly going to be shown in shadows. So I'm actually going to go back and grab one of the lighter. I'm going to brush in some lighter area down here, very kind of subtly. You're not going to see reflected light on the light side of the sphere because it's much too weak.